Everyone. This is Dr. Rajalakshmi, Assistant Professor of English from Rajalakshmi Ramaswamy College, Trichy. In today's video, we'll discuss about early phase of modern English novels. As we look back in history, all the literary movements in literature came from England, which means they did not originate or germinate in England, but mostly in France, Germany, in Italy, even in Scandinavia. So many of the sources were drawn from France and Germany. So all the literary movements, or shall I say new movements in literature, started there, and later on English caught up with the new trends and adopted those new trends. So the so-called novels were not originated in England, but actually they were originated in Spain. The first English novel called as Don Quixote came out in 1707, and the pattern of Don Quixote, the novelists like Henry Fielding and Joseph Andrews modeled. I mean, they modeled their novels on the pattern of Don Quixote. And novel was begun by outsiders who came and settled in England. When we think of modern English novels, the first two names which come to our mind are Joseph Conrad and Henry James. They are called as the pioneers, or shall I say precursors of modern English novels. And Joseph Conrad and Henry James are outsiders. Means Joseph Conrad came from Poland and Henry James came from America. But both Conrad and James, they adopted English as their own language, and they adopted England as their own country. They became British citizens. So Joseph Conrad became a citizen of England in 1894, and Henry James became a citizen of England in 1874. So both were called as the leading novelists of the modern form. So when we think of the modern form, the questions that come to our mind are what is modern about this modern novel, and what is the distinction, or shall I say in which way modern novels are distinct from Victorian novels, because before modern novels we had Victorian novels. So during Victorian period, we had early Victorians and later Victorians. Charles Dickens, William Thackeray are called as the early Victorians. George Eliot and Thomas Hardy are called as later Victorians. And modern English novels are represented with the same, or shall I say, similar combination, like Joseph Conrad and Henry James. And coming to the aspects of Victorian novels are entertaining, storytelling. Uh, they are noted for its long narrative, and even critics used to say Victorian novels are a baggy monster, which means a huge bag where you can put anything and everything. Hence, formless. So, I would say formlessness is one of the strongest aspects of Victorian novels. And Victorian novels also involved a large number of characters. For example, if you take Charles Dickens' Pickwick Papers, Dickens involved nearly 356 characters in his novel. And Thackeray also did the same. And coming to Dickens, Dickens wrote nearly 2 dozen novels, and in almost all his novels, he involved a more and more number of characters. So, uh, Victorian novels are known for its formlessness. As I said already, formlessness is one of the strongest aspects of Victorian novels. So, in the early 20th century, the first thing modernists did was they declared that novel is an art form. And also, they said that novel is as self-conscious as poetry and drama. And especially Conrad and Henry James, they insisted that a novel must have form and novel must have uh, rules of construction. And also, they insisted that a novel must have a form, and that form must be organic and impressive. This is why we have novelists like E.M. Forster, who wrote theories of the novel. So E.M. Forster wrote how a novel has to be. For example, in his aspects of the novel, he delineated different aspects of novel. E.M. Forster said a novel must have a story, plot, character, language, and a plot must have a beginning, middle, and end, and how a beginning has to be, how a middle and end has to be. So all these things are delineated by E.M. Forster in his theoretical writings and aspects of the novel. And these British people were notoriously conservative. They do not change their mind. They do not easily move from their position. So this Joseph Conrad and Henry James were non-British and non-English speaking outsiders. So they actually settled in England. They adapted English as their own language. They adopted England as their own country. Henry James being an American, he learned British English and he started writing novels in English. So there lies the difference between British English and American English. For example, Henry James, The Portrait of a Lady, belongs to an American face. It is an American novel. And I would say it is one of the American classics. And if you take the other novels of Henry James, like The Tragic Muse, um, Wings of the Dove, The Ambassadors, The Golden Bowl, all these novels, they actually belong to the English face of Henry James and not to the American face. So these novels are included in the history of British literature and not the history of American literature. So there lies a difference. And coming to the peculiar features of English novels, if you take Henry James' American novels, uh, his novels have American context. I mean, the story, the plot, character, situation have American context. And if you take British novels of Henry James, they have international situations, which mean, uh, I mean, this the setting in their story, or maybe in England or Germany, in France, in Italy, or maybe any place on the continent. So international situations. He projected international situations in his British novels. One thing which is common about Joseph Conrad and Henry James is both are outsiders, and as I already said, they settled in England. And Joseph Conrad and Henry James, they did not altogether reject or discard traditions of Victorian novels, but actually they retained a good deal, which means the basics of storytelling and basics of narrative remained same with Joseph Conrad and Henry James. So what Conrad and Henry James brought into English novels was international plots, international situations, international characters, and hence international outlook. And now let's see the contribution of outsiders to English novels. As I already said, Joseph Conrad and Henry James, they actually settled in England, but they were outsiders. But Henry James being an American, he did not project a conservative outlook in his novels. Rather than projecting conservative outlook, he actually portrayed international outlook in his novels. So before that, English novels were confined to Jane Austen, and English novels were confined to English life, English situations, English characters, English outlook, which means the entire world was confined to English territory. But now there is an opening up. There is a change, which means England gets small space in the international canvas in the novels by Conrad and Henry James. So, what is the contribution of outsiders to the English novels? Internationalism. So, it's broadening of the canvas and broadening of the horizons, shall I say, crossing the boundaries and going beyond the national boundaries. All these are contribution of Joseph Conrad and Henry James to modern English novels. So, it actually enriched the English novels. And Joseph Conrad had an experience of Africa because he had traveled to that place. He was very much familiar with Africa. And if you take Henry James, he was very much familiar with America because he traveled to that place. So, Joseph Conrad, I mean, you could able to find African plots in Joseph Conrad because he had traveled to Congo. He was familiar with Congo. Even in one of his novels, Heart of Darkness, he used African plot. He used Congo as a city. So, besides storytelling of the novel, these writers actually added a new dimension of travelogue. Travelogue, and since they actually added a travel book material along with the storytelling of the novel. So, that's the end of the early phase of modern English novel. Let's discuss the later phase of modern English novel in the next video. Um, Thanks for watching.